Coming up, what an excellent day for Willie and Karl. Well, howdy, folks, and welcome to Minute 13 of The Exorcist Minute, a show where we endeavor to examine, extrapolate, and excavate The Exorcist minute by terrifying minute. My name is Lester Clark.
And I'm Keenan Diaz.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
And we'll be your holy guides on this journey through what some have called the scariest movie of all time. And yes, folks, we have a very special guest with us today. That voice you heard might sound familiar if you listen to the Marvel Movie Minute on the True Story FM network. That's TRU Story.fm. And actually, Andy has done an episode on The Exorcist in his other show, The Next Reel, and I highly recommend you go check that out. This is Andy Nelson, host of the Marvel Movie Minute Show. Hello, Andy.
Hello. Thank you both so much for having me. I am thrilled to talk about The Exorcist with you.
Okay.
Awesome. And Andy, before we jump in, I'd love to hear about you, about your show, and also how you got introduced to The Exorcist and what this movie means to you.
Yeah. Well, like I said, thank you so much. I've been doing movie podcasting for 12 years now, very long time.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a little old hat, I suppose. Primarily on The Next Reel, which is a podcast that I started with, a buddy from college, and we've just been talking about movies forever. I went to film school, so I worked in the industry for a very long time. I just love cinema and I love talking about it. And I've always had a draw to horror films, but it's funny with The Exorcist, this was one of those films that I think back in, I'm guessing junior high, I had some friends and there were a few movies that had these mythos crafted around them for some reason. And,
oh, yes.
And this film and The Wall, Pink Floyd's The Wall, were the two films that largely my buddy would always tell me about. He's like, don't watch The Wall by yourself or you're going to commit suicide. And he said, don't ever watch The Exorcist. Or no, he said, if you watch The Exorcist and you see the devil in it, that means you're going to die. and so, so it was a very long time before I watched either of those films. And, it was ridiculous. And I think I finally watched The Exorcist in high school and, certainly found it to be, pretty terrifying experience. And it's been a film that I've always really enjoyed. I was there in the theaters when the scariest, the version you've never seen was released. Got to see that with a full crowd and, seeing like the audience reaction to like the spider crawl and things like that. I mean, it's great. It's a thrilling experience to see with a big group of people.
Did you ever get to watch The Wall?
I did. I did finally. That's right. I watched it alone too, and I still.
Oh no!
No, I think that's a fantastic piece of.
Yeah, and you're like, this is just a bunch of music videos. This is not.
Yeah, it's the things that young people say about things, and it's funny because now I'm always like, I wonder what my kids say about are there movies that they talk about in this way? So. Who knows?
It's got to be like random TikTok videos or something like that.
Right.
Oh, yeah, the Momo footage.
Wait, the what?
Yeah, the Momo footage. Yeah, that's very
Wait, tell me about this Momo footage.
Maybe
what is
we
this?
Shouldn't, actually.
Oh, maybe not? Okay, all right.
No,
maybe we shouldn't.
Don't watch Momo alone. She'll come through the camera and eat you.
All right, well, I guess I'm deleting that. Giving me work, guys. Oh, my God. Andy, so you said you've been doing this for how many years again?
We first released our first episode of the podcast, The Next Reel, on November 11th, 2011.
Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah, we're just about to hit our 12th birthday.
Wow.
It's crazy. I know.
Keenan, in podcasting years, I feel like we are the two young priests in this equation.
Oh, yes. And you're the old priest, yes.
Yes, and we need, not old in years, but in podcasting, experience and stuff like that.
But strong in spirit, and we are weak in spirit.
Yes. So we need a holy Kenobi. Holy Kenobi. Ooh, I'm coining that.
Oh, it does say, but you mentioned, we did talk about this film. We did an Ellen Burstyn series on The Next Reel, and that was back in 2014. We talked about this, Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and Requiem for a Dream. So, fantastic actress. I'm thrilled that I get to talk about a few minutes of her. So it's gonna be
yes, fun. Yay! She's in these minutes. Oh man! All right. Well, let's jump into it again, Andy. We are so happy to have you here with us. Okay, so our minute begins with Chris MacNeil clutching herself against the cold after just closing the window to her daughter's room.
And it ends with a shot of the rooftops of Georgetown University.
But let's go back to that unusually cold bedroom. Chris is bothered by the cold, but it seems like she's chalking it up to the open window. She moves over to her daughter, still asleep in the bed, covers her back up, because remember, we found her sleeping in this freezing room with the covers off, checks to see if she's cold, and then says, "Sure do love you," and kisses her. Now, this is a quick reveal of something we can touch on more later when we see Chris and Reagan interact. But I just want to bring this up here because this is the first time it's shown. And it's shown in a way that we can trust that what she is saying is true because she is saying it to her daughter, who is presumably asleep. And we'll get into that a little bit later as well. But it is the reveal that Chris does love her daughter, which right off the bat is sort of a subversion of expectations. The movie has already subtly revealed to us that Chris is an actress. And by this time in the book, we understand that she is a pretty big actress, pretty famous. She's the star of the script that she's reading in bed.
And I do want to point out, that we see her in the previous minute in the master bedroom alone in the bed. So, I mean, that's something else that we're implying, that she doesn't have a husband or that the husband is gone.
Yes, you are absolutely right. So we can understand that Chris MacNeil is a big frickin' deal. And so we could think that maybe this demon is taking advantage of this little girl's frayed relationship with her mother. It would be so easy and also so lazy to paint Chris MacNeil as this cold and distant mother who doesn't have time for her kid because she's this famous movie star. But what I love about this movie is that the movie decides to show us her love for Reagan first. We meet Chris the mom before we meet Chris the superstar. And I think that's very important. And it's done in this way that I think is very Shakespearean. Hang on, let me just adjust my nerd glasses here because, oh no, alas, we have fallen into the Shakespeare trap once again.
I don't know if you warned Andy that this is the kind of show that we do.
Oh, yeah.
The Shakespeare Trap.
Yes. We have a little thing. We fell into the Shakespeare trap once before. Okay, so there's this thing that goes back to Shakespeare plays that when a character is on stage alone, when they are doing a monologue or a soliloquy, or maybe they're talking to a character who is dead or asleep and can't hear them, they always speak the truth. Here you see the heart, the true feelings of the character. They could be a villain. They could be an unreliable or deceptive hero. They could be lying to everybody else on that stage. But when they are alone, that's when they turn inward or to us, the audience, and speak only the truth, or at least what they believe to be the truth. Keenan, you mentioned Sir Laurence Olivier in Richard III. The only time Richard is telling the truth is when he's talking to us, letting us in on his scheme. In Othello, the only time Iago isn't lying is when there is no one on stage to lie to. This is strictly for us. This is shorthand for, hey, at least this part right here is true.
One of the things they say about the fool in King Lear is that he's the only character who speaks the truth, and he's mostly speaking to Lear. So that's really interesting that, you might say that's a contradiction to this rule you've set up, but maybe not, because Lear is someone who can't, either is losing his mind and can't process or just refuses to hear the truth. So the fool can say whatever he wants to say.
That's a good point. I did think a little bit about the fool in another way, in that because King Lear is a king, everybody is kind of afraid to disagree with him. Everybody is kind of worried about what he will think or what he will do if what they say displeases him in some way. But it's kind of like the fool's job to make light of life and kind of, speak plainly. And I do like how Shakespeare uses fools to kind of say exactly what is going on and exactly what everybody is thinking, even to somebody as powerful and potentially dangerous to them as a king.
Right. I was trying to read up about, King Lear because we have a character named Reagan and our character here is named Reagan, but I haven't found a nice, tidy, reason why that would be.
Oh my God, Keenan, I am so glad you actually brought that up because, we are going deeper and deeper and deeper. This is
the Shakespeare Trap. Oh no.
The Shakespeare Trap. We're never going to get out. But no, there's a little bit in the book. I can't find it right now, but where Chris MacNeil, I think it's when she's looking at the rose on the table that Reagan leaves her like every morning at breakfast. And she looks at it and she's like, and she thought, she almost named her Goneril. And I was so confused by this. I had no idea what, like, Goneril, it sounds like a disease. Like, what?
Gargamel. Yeah, that's what I would name my daughter.
Yeah, right. And I didn't until I watched like a production on YouTube of King Lear, with, starring James Earl Jones, which was amazing. I realized, like, oh, King Lear has 3 daughters. He has Regan, Goneril, and those are the 2 like evil daughters. Right. And then he has, who is it? Cordelia. Yeah, one of those Elias.
Well, why would you not name your daughter Cordelia?
That seems like the one to go with. Yeah,
right. What is this like Reagan? Yeah, I have no idea. It's German for rain. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like Queen or something like that. Yeah, I couldn't quite figure out why.
Goneril would be the last on that list.
That would be the last one, right?
But it would be as I am the demon Goneril.
Yes.
I have possessed your cunting daughter.
Yes, right. If we, I mean, you would think that, the demon shows up. It's like, oh, your name's Goneril. I don't know.
Right, I'm afraid of you. Yeah.
It's like, they're communicating on the Ouija board. It's like, so what's your name? Ooh, oh, okay. I gotta.
Never mind. I'm gonna look elsewhere.
Andrew, do you have any thoughts about this moment here?
Well, I mean, the Shakespearean element is very interesting. I hadn't really thought about it. I was just kind of taken by the. I guess kind of the piece that we have in this room at this point. It doesn't feel like evil at this point. Like as the film progresses, the cold in the room starts taking on a presence. Like it's cold because of something else other than nature. And here, like this is the first time where, or maybe perhaps the only time where I feel like it's cold in this room because the window is open. Like who knows? I mean, I guess you can end up reading it both ways, but as the start of the film, it does feel like we're at a space where perhaps things are a little more normal than they will become later in the film. And so, I'm not exactly sure what the intentions are. Obviously, there's something going on in the house because we have some form of rats or something up in the attic making all sorts of crazy noise that, as people going into a horror film called The Exorcist, we assume that it's not rats. And, I suppose you could take it that the room is cold for something other than this, the demon already working its way into taking over Regan. But I like that at this point, it just feels like she went to bed with her window open. It's cold outside. I'm going to shut it, tell her I love her. And it just like in the scope of a film, like setting up the world as to like what to expect, like this feels like the relationship that we have between mom and daughter. And so,
yes. Yeah. And so, Freakin has done this here with Chris speaking to her daughter, who can't hear her. And he's doing it to say, this isn't the story you think it's going to be. Chris is not a bad mom, although she might think that she is. And that is one of her skeletons, her inner demons. And speaking of inner demons, right, there's a part in the book that happens here before she goes downstairs. She goes back to her room and back to sleep. And she dreams, and that dream is very disturbing. Let's have a listen. A reading from the Book of Blatty. Chris slept and dreamed about death in the staggering particular. Death as if death were still never yet heard of, while something was ringing, she, gasping, dissolving, slipping off into void, thinking over and over, I'm not going to be, I will die, I won't be, and forever and ever, oh, Papa, don't let them, oh, don't let them do it, don't let me be nothing forever, melting, unraveling, ringing the phone. She leapt up with her heart pounding, hand to the phone and no weight in her stomach, a core with no weight and her telephone ringing. She answered the phone. The assistant director. In makeup at 6, honey. Right. How you feeling? If I go to the bathroom and it doesn't burn, then I figure I'm ahead. He chuckled. I'll see you. Right. And thanks. She hung up and for moments sat motionless, thinking of the dream. A dream? Well, like thought in the half-light of waking. That terrible clarity, gleam of the skull. Non-being, irreversible. She could not imagine it. God, it can't be. She considered, and at last bowed her head. But it is. She went to the bathroom, put on a robe, and padded quickly down to the kitchen, down to life and sputtering bacon.
Jeez.
Yeah, Jesus.
We're going to join her in just a minute, but first, holy shit. Talk about truth. So here is something that really bothers Chris. The idea of death, the idea that there is nothing, no afterlife, no heaven, no hell, no God, no devil, just nothing. Listeners, I want you to hold on to this dream, this particular inner demon, because this is something that comes back again and again in this story. Remember those first 3 themes: doubt, isolation, despair. And this is despair right here. She is despairing that there is nothing. She's not scared of the possibility. She is sure of it. And that is what separates fear from despair, right? So hold on to that. But also hold on to those 3 counteracting themes, right? Conviction, communion, hope. She has a connection, a communion with her daughter. She is not alone. And the love between her and her daughter expels those thoughts when they are together. And likewise, we'll see later that Regan has dark thoughts about divorce, etc., that are expelled when mom is with her. And boy, I sure hope that nothing happens in this story to separate them from each other, because that would suck. If I was, I don't know, say a supernatural demon, the first thing I'd do is to get these 2 away from each other so they can't hold each other up. In the book, one of the worst things that the demon says to Chris is, "You did this. You did this to her. This is your fault. The divorce, putting your career before everything, before her, you did this." And I remember reading that and thinking, oh, you asshole, because that is what Chris fears. She fears that she might not be a good mom. And that doubt gets bigger and more powerful when she is alone.
Well, and isn't that, I think so much of that boils down to parenting anyway. The nature of, again, there are these little beings that we take, bring into our own lives. There's no instruction book. And we just kind of have to figure out how to do all this stuff on our own, and hopefully not screw them up, right? That's kind of every parent's goal, is to figure it out as I go along and make sure that they come out not screwed up, hopefully better than I did. And but it is a real fear, going through this process, and you're always wondering, are the choices that I'm making in some way going to be impacting how my child grows into an adult? And when you're going through a divorce, or when you've been through a divorce or a separation, as Chris has here, that's amplified, because suddenly now you have this rift in your life, and now you're constantly like, what do I do to make sure that this doesn't lead them to go down a much darker road? And so, I can see that she's in this place that, all of these things are really weighing on her.
Yeah.
The thought of nothingness is so interesting, because I was having a conversation with my stoner friends. I'm not a stoner, but I have a lot of stoner friends, and they talk, they were talking about the afterlife, and they're like, all there is blackness. And I said, well, yes, but blackness itself is just a metaphor, because it's really nothing, because we're all atheists. And they're like, oh yeah. It's actually like to put a face to nothingness is almost impossible. And so if Chris is having these dreams about that's something that I'll never take enough drugs in the world to actually imagine what that's like. Nothingness.
Right.
Well, and also I think it ties into, I think the minutes that we're going to be discussing this week really tie also very much into her career as an actress. This is a person who is always, her livelihood is putting herself in front of audiences and always having that draw. And I imagine that there's also that fear of putting herself out there and not having an audience, and that emptiness, that sense of, like, I'm not worth it. I'm not worth it for people to come and invest their time to watch what I'm doing. And I think that's probably also weighing, something that probably weighs heavily on anyone who gets themselves into this sort of position in the acting world.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very good point. Yeah, you have that kind of calling, you have that kind of like inclination in you, and the last thing you want to be is like just another tree falling in the woods. Oh my gosh, yeah.
A tree on stage that nobody pays attention to. Just playing a tree.
If a tree falls on stage and no one's in the audience, does anyone hear it?
But also this idea, art is real art is selfish, and I hesitate to say that because I'm sure we have a lot of people who are artists who might listen to this, and that's something.
We're artists ourselves, yeah.
Yeah, I think that at some point you have to recognize that there are things you sacrifice when you are an artist of any kind. The movies are the most prone to us thinking that, because they also come with glamour and money and that sort of idea. So it's like, but even if you are a novelist or a poet, Emily Dickinson was selfish. She had to, find a spot where she was not dealing with her family and spend time away from them and away from the church. And, that very act is is lonely and sacrificial to the rest of your responsibilities. Just to bum us all out some more.
Oh yeah, no. Oh no, that's the theme of this minute, I think.
You're right.
No, but I remember somebody talking about like it is sort of a form of selling your soul because you kind of are giving up your life for this thing, right?
Yeah.
And it is if you look at it that way, right? I mean, like the story of Faust and, selling his soul to, Mephistopheles and, getting like riches and youth and everything in return. But like in a way you could personify, whatever your calling is, right? Writing, acting, sculpting, painting, podcasting. And you could say that, I am giving all of my energy, all of my thoughts, all of my time, all of my heart to this work. And hopefully it will reward me with validation and riches and recognition and blah blah
and immortality, which is what a lot of artists are seeking, right? To have a body of work that lives after you are nothing, and people will know you when you are no longer there.
Right. Which I believe it feels like. It's kind of funny to think about because it's the other side of that coin of, you mentioned it earlier, Keenan, the idea of Chris being afraid of nothingness. But then, hang on, like, you're not going to be around when the nothingness is happening. So, like, you won't even, like, she's almost imagining that she's going to be conscious that she is nothing. And, but then at the same time, it's like, people desiring that immortality. It's like, yes, people will remember me. People will, like we remember Shakespeare. We could call Shakespeare immortal, but also he's dead. And he's not, he doesn't know that, some chucklehead on a podcast is doing a running gag about his,
about how boring
about his works.
He is. About how, here comes Shakespeare again.
So they're making fun of me again.
Yeah, but we talk a lot about the Abrahamic religions, and they all have this idea that is linear. The afterlife is an extension of this life. It's different. It's better. It's superior. It's real. Where this life is in some ways not real, but it's a straight line. So if you are performing, not performing the religion, that's not how to say it, but if you are in the religion's good graces, you live on forever in a line, which is different from some of the other Eastern religions, which say that the afterlife is not real itself, and it's circular and also not tangible.
Yeah, or rebirth, all that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I remember a scene from Faust. I saw part of a production on stage where Faust is talking about how he fears the fires of hell, and Mephistopheles kind of looks around and he says, well, this is hell. This right here. Like you don't have to worry about like going somewhere at the end. Like you're here right now.
Yeah, that's very much like 1400, 1500, 1600, 1700 thoughts of what it was like the devil is not the master of hell, he's the master of earth. Like that seems to have slipped away from a lot of Christian preachings now, right? The Christian mythos doesn't quite have the devil as the leader of the earth, but that's what John Bunyan would say, or Milton would say, like the devil, the earth is itself hell.
Right. He's the prince of this world.
He's the prince of this world, right? To be worldly is to be the opposite of being godly.
Right. Satisfying your animal needs, your, being hungry, and lustful and, and all that stuff.
All right, let's talk about some other things.
Heavy stuff. Yeah. Let's get out of here and join Chris as she goes downstairs to, as Blatty puts it, life and sputtering bacon. I need some bacon right now. Jesus. And thank God we get some levity here with the introduction of two of my favorite characters, Willie and Karl. They are Chris's housekeepers, and I love them. What do you guys think of these two?
Yeah, it's fun to have them. And thinking of Blatty as this comedy writer, they're kind of this stock couple, right? Of the man who has to do everything around the house, but he does everything wrong, and the wife who has control over all of it. And I think they're a lot of fun.
I love them.
It's an interesting pair because they definitely feel like, and there will certainly be kind of a sense of a connection to perhaps their history as Bert confronts them later in the film. But there is, it's an interesting sense of a pair of characters because they do feel kind of like these German housekeepers, and it's,
yes.
I find that to be kind of an interesting element to add in this film that really hasn't had necessarily like that political angle, but it does suddenly feel like there is something more going on with them. Like, are they here because they had fled Germany? Like, what's their story? I'm curious about them as characters, and
yes,
I'm always curious, especially from someone like you who has read the books. Like, do we have more of a backstory with them?
Oh, we do. In the books, they are expanded beautifully. So first things first, they are not German, and they will be very upset if you refer to them as such. They are Swiss. Yeah, so they are Swiss, and that's one of the things that is kind of this tension between Karl specifically and Burke as we meet him later on, is him getting drunk and calling Karl a Nazi, and him just kind of very silently, very stoically, it's like I am Swiss, and him just Burke just going off on, it's like, oh yes, and you never went bowling with Goebbels, or you never drove Rudolf Hess around, and just and it's definitely something for their relationship, and also Karl specifically is hiding a secret in the book that we're going to get to a little bit later. Yes, and he is suspect number one when Burke goes, specifically for his physicality, his build.
Oh, that's interesting. We don't have any inkling of that here. We don't suspect anybody in the house of doing any of this, right?
Yes, although it is interesting that the one thing we, again, they don't play into it, but the one thing that we really see him doing in this scene is bringing in a big jug of, one of those 5-gallon jugs of water.
Yes.
And so there is obviously something physical with the work that he's doing here.
Yeah. So in the book, he is described as very tall and very strong. And we'll definitely get into that. But first, let's take a look at Willie. Willie is played by Gina Petrushka. I tried to find some stuff on her. There's not a lot on the internet. This might be her most famous role, but it seems like she's mostly done TV work before The Exorcist. And then one more thing after The Exorcist, a miniseries called Sybil, where she plays Dr. Lazarus, and which interestingly stars a young Sally Field, whose character has developed 16 different personalities. And if Max von Sydow were in that movie, he would say, there is only one Sally Field.
Right. So she would play one of the doctors that Sybil goes to, who is not as effective as Joanne Woodward's doctor later on. So Sybil goes and sees a bunch of people who try to help her, but the only one who believes that she has what do you call it now? Dissociative personality disorder, something along those lines, as opposed to multiple personality disorder.
It was mentioned in Hereditary.
Right.
It's like IDD or something like that, I think. I might be wrong, folks. If we're wrong, write in and tell us.
But Sybil was this miniseries that both brought light to dissociative identity disorder, but then also spawned a bunch of people to have symptoms of it when they probably wouldn't have otherwise. Retroactively, people have looked at that and said, like, oh, it's sort of a copycat effect, and it might have been kind of hypnotizing young, impressionable people into developing it.
Right. Oh, yes, and you're correct. Yeah, it's DID. Yeah. Not
DID. So what was it? Dissociative. Oh, I said it in the
dissociative identity. Yeah.
Right. Instead of multiple personality disorder, which is what it was called at the time in Sybil.
Right.
Correct.
I think they talk about DID quite a bit in Split, I think, is another recent.
Oh, right.
Oh, okay.
That also brings that up.
Yeah. And then, so that's interesting. That's later, the Sally Field show. We'll talk about Sally Field a little bit later on.
Oh, yeah. So that's Willie. That's Gina Petrushka. Then in comes Willie's husband, Karl, played by Rudolf Schundler. And oh my God, this guy has a pedigree 9 miles long, going all the way back to 1924. Jesus. He is a German actor, don't tell Burke, and a director, definitely don't tell Burke. 27 directing credits, 248 acting credits. From 1924 to 1990, this guy worked. Now, I will say that he is the only actor in this movie for whom I see someone different in my head when I read the book. Sorry, Herr Schundler. In the book, he is depicted as this tall, powerfully built, stone-faced, expressionless, almost gorilla of a man. In fact, he reminds me of Max the Gorilla Butler from Cats Don't Dance.
Lester, now we're falling into the Cats Don't Dance
Now we're falling into the Cats Don't Dance. It's right next to the Shakespeare Trap, right? How does the kitty cat go? And that's what makes him such a funny foil to Chris here, because he's just standing there like, there are rats Yes, I just said that, but the attic is clean. Well, okay, we've got tidy rats, no rats. Karl, I heard them last night. Maybe plumbing, maybe boards. Yeah, maybe rats. Will you buy the damn traps? Yes, madam, I go now. No, not now, Karl. The stores are closed. They're closed, chided Willie. I will see. Chris and Willie traded glances, and then Willie shook her head, turning back to the bacon. Chris sipped at her coffee. Strange man. Like Willie, hard-working, very loyal, discreet, and yet something about him made her vaguely uneasy. What was it? His subtle air of arrogance? Defiance? No. Something else. Something hard to pin down. The couple had been with her for almost 6 years, and yet Karl was a mask, a talking, breathing, untranslated hieroglyph, running her errands on stilted legs. Behind the mask, though, something moved. She could hear his mechanism ticking like a conscience. She stubbed out her cigarette, heard the front door creaking open, then shut. They are closed, muttered Willie. And that's Blatty's comedy shining through. I really like the dynamic between Chris and Willie and Karl. It's so sweet and so cute. And something to remember here, folks, Willie and Karl are hired help. They are not related to Chris or Reagan by blood. And that may not seem like an important thing now, but it will be later. So hold on to that.
I want to point out. Oh, go ahead, Andy.
Well, I just that's interesting because I wasn't. I was trying to gauge their relationship as I rewatched the film. I'm like, are they like they're the traveling, housekeepers that kind of go with her? Like, did they come with her from California, or are they from this house? Like, I wasn't really exactly sure where they came from. I mean, at the end of the film, they stay behind. But
do they?
Well, don't they at the very end of the film? They're like they like wave as she drives off, but that doesn't mean that they stay behind. I mean, they very likely could go with her. But it is one of those interesting things. Like, I was trying to figure out, like, have they, are they the kind of people who've been around the whole time that Reagan has been growing up?
You get the idea that Sharon is someone who's been around and goes with them, who will be Chris's assistant, but not necessarily these two.
In the movie, it's a little bit more unclear, but in the book, they do live with her, and they live in the main house in Los Angeles as well.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And it's interesting because there is this kind of like fatherly relationship that Karl has with Reagan. There's this scene later on where Karl goes to Father Karras privately, and we know him throughout the book as this rock, as this guy who's never going to show any emotion at all. But he goes privately to Karras and he says, "Will everything be okay?" And his voice cracks when he says, "And Miss Reagan." And it's heartbreaking because you see that, and we're going to find out why, that he has such a connection to Reagan, who is not his daughter. It's a very kind of like close relationship, almost like I would say that Reagan and Chris consider them to be family. And in the end, so when they are leaving this house and they're going back to Los Angeles, it's funny because like you say, they go in a separate car to the airport, and Karl takes the family car and drives it from Washington back to LA, like on his own. And I just want to like watch the movie of that.
Karl's road
trip. The wacky adventures. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, I mean, it's so interesting because, and I wonder if this is one of those points in the way the book was written versus the elements that Friedkin saw as not that important for the film. Because like when you have this whole thing, when at the beginning of their conversation, he's like, the attic is clean.
Right.
That kind of, he seems so possessive of the space that's like, I know it's clean. It's my attic. I know how to clean my attic. Don't judge me. Like there was that sense. And I think that's one of those elements that for me, the way I read that was like, he came with this house and is taking care of them. He knows the attic is clean because he's the one who regularly is doing the upkeep of this particular property.
Right.
And so I guess that's kind of the way that I went about reading it. But
that's how I would read the movie for sure. Definitely.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. There is a bit in the book that they don't include where they kind of go on this verbal fencing about the rats for a little bit longer. And Chris she can't resist messing with him a little bit more. So she takes like a Mickey Mouse stuffed plushie doll and she puts it into one of the traps upstairs because like obviously the noises have been going on. but there are no rats. Like Karl is right. So the traps are still clean. They're still like untriggered. And so she goes and she puts this little toy mouse in one of them. And then she goes down and she's like, "Oh, Karl, I thought I heard something upstairs. Why don't you go and check?" And she's just hoping to get a reaction, just to get a rise out of this like stone of a man. Just like Burke is trying to get a reaction out of him. And Karl comes down with the mousetrap, with the Mickey Mouse plushie in it, and he just walks by her and he mutters, he's like, "Someone is being funny." And I love that. That's Karl to a T. He won't even react even when someone is trying to get him to laugh.
That is funny. Well, and the whole thing also plays, I mean, to your point about the comedy, the fact that he is like, he basically drops literally like everything that he's doing to go deal with this rat trap issue that she has, to the point where like he had already set the water jug, the full one, on the floor.
Right.
He doesn't bother putting it in. He takes the empty one with him as he walks out. It's like, fine, you want me to do this rat trap thing? I'm going to go do it. And I'm just going to walk out in the middle of what I'm doing. And,
let me just drop what I'm doing.
Yeah. So it's funny the way that he reacts like that. And it's interesting because I suppose there is, when you're working with somebody like a Chris or, a prominent actor or actress, it is one of those funny things where I do wonder if you get into like a relationship where your persona is allowed to come out a little bit, because I can also see like with somebody like this, like you don't do that because that's how you end up losing your job.
If we can talk about some of the blocking as Chris comes in, because we're trying to establish a lot without dialogue and be very efficient. So she comes in from the far side of the kitchen. She has it's a cigarette right in her mouth that she still has. I
think so. Yeah.
She brings down her script. She's passing everything. She goes to the coffee. And, so we could see the entire room and just sort of, see what she's bringing down with her and what's important to her. And then Willie will say, "Good morning, Mrs. MacNeil." And, that sort of helps answer a lot of the questions we might have if we didn't know the film, right? Like what's going on? Is she a single mother or what is it? Right? She's Mrs. MacNeil. And then Karl will say, "Madam," differently.
Yeah. And that establishes they're not related, right? It's not like,
right.
"Good morning,
this isn't mom," right?
Right. Oh, very good. Yeah. Just like very, very subtle, but it tells us so much. All right. Well, so our minute ends with a brief glimpse of Catholic Hogwarts. No. Expelliarmus et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. See, it all works. It all works. But no, we will get to this in the next minute. But for now, gentlemen, is there anything else you want to say for this minute?
No, it's a good minute establishing, our characters here. So I enjoy it.
Yeah, I think we got everything we can.
All right. So Keenan, are you thinking what I'm thinking?
I think I am, Lester.
And Andy, are you thinking what we're thinking?
I believe so.
Until next time, folks.
The
power of rat traps compels you.